Snow lay thick over the Colorado Valley, heavy and blinding, transforming the landscape into a world of white silence. Each gust of wind cut across Jonathan Harrow's face, tugging at his coat and freezing the hair that escaped from beneath his hat. He stood on the porch, shoulders hunched against the storm, eyes fixed on the distant figure moving slowly through the drifts. The woman was almost unrecognizable beneath the icy crust of snow and frost, her wedding dress stiff and damp, her body trembling with cold. She stumbled forward, and Jonathan moved toward her, his boots sinking into the snow with each step. He lifted her gently, feeling the shocking weight of fragility in his arms, and began the slow trek back to the cabin. The wind howled, pushing against them, stealing warmth, and forcing Jonathan to lean forward, brace himself, and shield her body with his own. Every movement was a struggle. The snow clung to their clothing, piling in wet clumps, and each breath was a cloud of mist in the frozen air. The children pressed close to the cabin windows, their small faces pale, watching as their father carried the stranger through the storm, realizing in a silent, wordless way that this moment would change everything. Inside the cabin, the fire threw a dancing light across the rough-hewn walls, illuminating the children as they huddled near the hearth. Jonathan laid her down carefully, wrapping her in layers of blankets, feeling the tremor of life beneath his hands. The warmth slowly seeped into her frozen body, and her fingers, stiff and pale, began to regain color. The smell of pine smoke and the crackle of the fire filled the room, a signal that life had returned, if only barely. Jonathan sat beside her, hands resting on his knees, watching the subtle rhythm of her breathing and the first fragile signs of recovery. Outside, the storm raged relentlessly, but inside, a fragile sanctuary had been created. The woman's hair, frozen in icy strands, slowly loosened as Jonathan adjusted the blankets around her shoulders, careful not to jostle her too roughly. He glanced at the children, seeing their wide eyes and tentative curiosity, feeling the first stirrings of connection and shared responsibility. Every small movement, every shift in her breathing, was a thread weaving their fates together. A quiet awareness settled over him that from this night onward, their lives would be intertwined in ways they could not yet understand. Time seemed to stretch, marked only by the rhythm of the fire and the soft rise and fall of her chest. Jonathan's hands, rough and calloused, brushed against the edges of the blankets as he tucked her tighter, pressing warmth into her frozen body. The storm outside became a distant roar compared to the fragile warmth that began to bloom inside the cabin. The children edged closer, drawn by the sense of new possibility, feeling the tension of fear transform into something gentler, something that hinted at hope. Jonathan's gaze lingered on her, on the ring glinting faintly in the firelight, on the delicate lace torn and stained by snow. He understood, in a deep and unspoken way, that he had pulled her from the brink not only into warmth, but into a chance for belonging. The weight of responsibility settled across his shoulders, steady and unyielding, and yet within it there was a quiet comfort, a promise of connection that stretched beyond the walls of the cabin. As the fire flickered and shadows danced, Jonathan felt the first stirrings of what might grow into something unbreakable, a bond forged in the cold, in the storm, and in the quiet, unwavering act of saving a life. The room smelled of wood smoke, wet pine, and the sharp bite of snow, each scent anchoring the moment in reality and memory. The woman's chest rose and fell steadily now, her body responding to warmth, her pulse returning. And Jonathan allowed himself to relax slightly, knowing that the night's work had not been in vain. The children watched, tentative but fascinated, as the tension in the room softened, replaced by a delicate, unspoken promise. The snow continued to fall outside, relentless and untamed, but inside, a new beginning had taken root, fragile yet undeniable. Jonathan reached for another blanket, draping it carefully across her shoulders, his fingers brushing her icy skin with deliberate care. The warmth from the fire, from his hands, and from the layers of fabric seeped into her, and the faint color returning to her cheeks signaled life renewed. A silent understanding passed between him and the children. This woman was now part of their world, and their world had changed irrevocably. The storm's fury outside mirrored the tension and uncertainty within, yet within the cabin walls, safety, hope, and the first threads of connection began to take hold. Hours seemed to pass in the quiet rhythm of care and warmth. The woman stirred, a slow exhalation, a shift in position, subtle signs that she had survived the night. Jonathan sat beside her, observing the delicate pulse of life returning, aware that this night marked the beginning of something far larger than a single act of mercy. It was the start of a bond that would shape the days to come, a quiet, steady tether between two lives previously untouched by each other. The storm outside continued its howl, but inside the cabin, a fragile peace had been established. The fire cast long shadows across the floorboards, flickering over the children's faces and the woman lying on the blankets, her body finally beginning to relax. Jonathan's gaze lingered, a mixture of relief and resolve settling in him. The threads of responsibility, protection, and the first seeds of emotional closeness had been planted, delicate and unstoppable, ready to grow through the cold, through the challenges, and into the shared future that awaited them all. Time lost meaning as he watched her, the cabin a cocoon of warmth, scent, and sound. The snowstorm outside was fierce and unrelenting, yet it could not reach them here, in this moment suspended between the harshness of the world and the fragile promise of new life. Jonathan understood that from this night forward, their stories were no longer separate. Each crackle of the fire, each exhalation of the woman, each small, cautious step by the children toward hope became part of the tapestry that would bind them together. The storm would pass, as storms always did, but the life he had pulled from the snow would remain, entwine with his own, and the first whispers of a future together began to stir. Isabel slowly regained awareness of her surroundings, her body fragile and pale, but undeniably alive. The first shallow breaths deepened into steady inhalations, and her fingers twitched as though testing the warmth and solidity of the blankets around her. Jonathan observed her cautiously, noting the subtle, hesitant movements as she shifted her weight, stretched her limbs, and slowly pushed herself upright. Each motion was measured, deliberate, a tentative reclamation of control over a body that had been abandoned to the cold. The children, initially silent observers, edged closer with tentative steps, drawn by curiosity and the faint pulse of life that now filled the room. Their small gestures, hands extended, eyes wide with cautious trust, created the first fragile threads of connection between Isabel and the family. Every object in the cabin became a silent witness to her story. The stained lace of her wedding dress, stiff with residual frost, hinted at promises broken and a future denied. The gold ring on her finger caught the firelight, a glint of memory and significance that Jonathan could not ignore. Each detail spoke of a life interrupted, of hope deferred, of cruelty and misjudgment that had thrown her into the snow. He understood that this encounter was no accident, that fate had delivered a test to him as much as it had delivered Isabel to his doorstep. The weight of that understanding settled heavily on his shoulders, yet beneath it grew a quiet determination to protect, to nurture, and to provide space for healing. Outside, the valley remained relentless and unforgiving. Frost hardened every stream and pond, snow buried familiar paths, and the wind tore across the hills with a biting persistence. Yet within the cabin, a contrasting rhythm had begun to emerge. The aroma of simmering food mingled with the scent of pine smoke from the fire, creating a tangible sense of warmth and safety. Each small gesture, from Jonathan laying extra blankets over her shivering shoulders to the children quietly stacking firewood or setting bowls on the table, contributed to the delicate reconstruction of Isabel's sense of security. In this controlled, sheltered environment, the brutal forces of nature were mitigated, and the first sense of belonging began to root itself within her. As the hours passed, Isabel moved more confidently, testing the boundaries of the cabin and her new life. She untangled her hair, carefully folding the frost-stiffened strands, and took tentative steps to arrange the blankets and tend the hearth. Small movements toward autonomy became exercises in reassurance. She carried water from the frozen bucket, fed the animals in the pen, and gathered kindling with hands that had grown steadier from exertion. Each act, simple yet essential, was a reclamation of agency after the helplessness imposed by the storm and her past. Jonathan watched with a mixture of vigilance and quiet admiration, understanding that this process was not merely practical, but profoundly symbolic, the slow, deliberate restoration of strength, trust, and presence. The children adapted to her presence as naturally as the hearth adapted to the fire. They brought her small tools, assisted with chores, and accepted her guidance in ways that reinforced her emerging role within the household. Isabel's tentative leadership became a visible, living force in the cabin. Her touch on the animal's flanks was gentle but firm, her movements careful but confident. Each day, the cadence of domestic life settled around her like a protective rhythm, grounding her in the tangible realities of survival, care, and shared responsibility. Jonathan recognized the importance of this structure, understanding that the pattern of daily effort was as critical to her recovery as warmth or food. Isabel began to restore habits that had once been routine, habits displaced by fear, trauma, and the harshness of the world beyond the cabin walls. She scrubbed the floors, organized the larder, and tended the small hearth garden with meticulous attention. Each action was a reclamation of control over her environment, a quiet declaration of presence and worth. Jonathan noted the small victories, the way her posture straightened, the way her eyes reflected awareness instead of panic, and the subtle rhythm she established in coordinating tasks with the children. This was no longer merely survival. It was the formation of a life in which she could participate actively and safely. The process of adaptation carried a deeper resonance. Every chore completed, every animal cared for, every corner of the cabin attended to became a symbol of restoration and reclamation. The boundaries of fear and uncertainty gradually contracted, replaced by the structures of daily living, the warmth of shared labor, and the tacit reassurance of being needed and valued. Isabel's body strengthened, her spirit adapted, and a sense of ownership over her life began to flourish. Jonathan recognized the subtle shift, the invisible tether forming between them, a bond rooted not in words or promises, but in the shared labor of living, the quiet rhythms of survival, and the emerging familiarity of trust. By nightfall, the cabin held a fragile yet tangible harmony. The storm outside continued to rage, but the interior had become a sanctuary of movement, routine, and growing intimacy. The fire cast long, flickering shadows that danced across walls and furniture, reflecting a domestic choreography of care and resilience. Isabel, now able to move with quiet certainty, handled each task with a mindful attentiveness that strengthened the invisible threads binding her to Jonathan and the children. Every careful step toward independence was matched by a simultaneous deepening of connection, the unspoken acknowledgement of mutual reliance and shared future taking root. As the day drew to a close, Jonathan watched her tend the hearth, her movements smooth and confident, her body warmed by exertion and the glow of the fire. The children nestled close, their trust in her solidifying with each passing hour. Isabel, once a fragile, frost-bound figure, had begun to inhabit the cabin fully, to stake a claim on the space that had become her refuge. The storm's wrath outside seemed to emphasize the calm within, a contrast that underscored the profound transformation occurring. Jonathan felt the weight of responsibility mingle with a quiet pride, recognizing that her resilience, coupled with his guidance and the children's acceptance, had begun to form a delicate but unbreakable foundation for the life they would now share. The storm intensified, snowflakes whipping horizontally through the valley, turning the landscape into a blur of white and gray. The wind howled like an untamed beast, rattling the cabin walls and bending the pines outside. Pathways vanished under fresh drifts, and isolation pressed against every surface, magnifying the smallest tensions. Jonathan moved with measured precision, his eyes scanning the barn and the surrounding landscape, aware of the fragility of life contained within the confines of the snowbound homestead. Inside, the low moans of the barn animals punctuated the roar of the storm, and a single cow stood restless, heavy with impending birth, her sides trembling, her breath labored. Isabel approached the animal cautiously, each step deliberate and steady, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them against the cow's flanks. She felt the heat of the animal, the shudder of her labor, and instinctively adjusted her posture, drawing on memories of her uncle's veterinary practices from years past. Jonathan watched silently, noting how she took initiative, her presence calm yet commanding, every movement precise and necessary. Together, they prepared for the birth, setting buckets and straw, the barn dimly lit by lanterns swinging in the wind outside. The scent of hay, damp earth, and animal musk filled the space, mingling with the adrenaline that heightened their senses and sharpened their focus. The labor progressed unevenly. The cow strained, shifting weight, hooves slipping in the straw, muscles tensing and relaxing in a rhythm of pain and persistence. Jonathan leaned close, his strong hands assisting where needed, while Isabel mirrored his movements, her fingers pressing gently yet firmly, her arms straining with effort. Sweat ran down her temples, mingling with streaks of blood and mud, but she did not falter. Breaths came in measured unison, their rhythm synchronized to the rise and fall of the animal, a silent conversation carried through touch and shared resolve. Every minute was punctuated by small victories. A leg turned, a head guided, a push encouraged. Until finally, with a last forceful heave, the newborn calf slid into the straw, wet, trembling, and alive. Relief surged through the barn, but it was tempered by exhaustion and the raw intensity of the ordeal. Isabel sank to her knees, hands still coated with hay and blood, her chest heaving as she surveyed the calf, now struggling to stand. Jonathan placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of the shared triumph. The children peeked through the barn doorway, eyes wide, witnessing a moment that transcended mere survival. They saw Isabel not as an outsider, but as someone who belonged, who could act decisively, and who had become an integral part of the household. The storm continued to batter the walls, but inside, a fragile harmony of accomplishment and trust settled over the trio. This crisis became a crucible for their bond. In the chaos of the storm and the intensity of life and death in the barn, emotional barriers dissolved. Jonathan felt an unfamiliar warmth of respect and growing attachment toward Isabel, tempered by awe at her courage and resilience. Every strain of muscle, every instinctive decision reinforced the understanding that she was no longer a passive survivor. She was a participant in their life, a partner in facing both peril and routine. Isabel, for her part, recognized her capacity to act, to care, and to protect those who had entrusted her with responsibility. The act of birth had become an unspoken covenant, a shared memory anchoring them together. As the storm began to subside, the barn settled into an uneasy calm. The calf stood on wobbly legs, mewing weakly but alive, and the cow nuzzled her newborn with instinctive tenderness. Jonathan and Isabel stepped back, exhausted but fulfilled, their bodies covered in grime, sweat, and the remnants of the ordeal. The children approached cautiously, their tentative steps bridging the space between observation and participation, their eyes reflecting wonder and admiration. Isabel met their gaze, her own tired but resolute, a silent promise of care and presence. The storm outside was not yet gone, but within the barn, life pulsed steadily, resilient and enduring. By the end of the night, the emotional landscape had shifted irrevocably.
Isabel had proven herself capable, independent, and committed. Jonathan had acknowledged his growing admiration and attachment, tempered by deep respect. The children's perceptions had transformed, recognizing her as part of the family fabric. The intensity of the crisis had forged connections stronger than words could describe, each gesture, glance, and movement carrying the weight of shared survival. The barn, once a place of uncertainty and isolation, had become a symbol of collaboration, resilience, and emerging trust. Life within the storm's grip had strengthened bonds and planted the seeds.
The morning air was sharp, cutting through layers of clothing and biting at exposed skin. Snow crunched beneath heavy boots as Caleb Garrison approached the homestead, his figure framed against the pale, icy light of the valley. A lawyer followed closely, documents clutched in gloved hands, their edges stiff from the cold. The wind twisted around them, whipping strands of hair and scarves into faces, carrying the distant, mournful cries of livestock from the barn. Each step Caleb took seemed deliberate, a march of authority and expectation, a claim against the fragile life Isabel had begun to rebuild. Inside the cabin, Jonathan moved quietly, assessing the situation with steady composure. His hands were calloused, his body used to labor and responsibility, but his eyes were alert, calculating, aware of the weight of the approaching threat. Isabel stood near the hearth, wrapped in layers of wool and blankets, her posture tense but unyielding. Her pulse raced with the memory of the life she had escaped, the pain and humiliation that had brought her here, and the uncertain hope that now clung to her chest. The children watched from behind the table, their small figures pressed against one another, eyes wide with fear and curiosity, sensing the gravity of the confrontation before it had even begun. Caleb's presence filled the threshold, a tangible force of wealth, power, and expectation. His gaze swept the cabin with an assumption of ownership, but Jonathan remained unmoved, a solid figure of quiet defiance. The lawyer's voice carried through the room, formal and precise, laying out the legal arguments and documents which supposedly entitled Caleb to claim Isabel. Jonathan's attention did not waver. He had prepared for this moment with the certainty that right and justice were on his side. Outside, the wind moaned against the roof, echoing the tension inside, as if the elements themselves acknowledged the conflict. Isabel's eyes flicked between the two men, fear mingling with a growing recognition of her own strength. She had survived the storm, the isolation, the despair, and now she faced a different kind of trial. Jonathan's presence was steadying, a reminder that protection did not always come from force, but from unwavering support, moral clarity, and the bonds they had forged in the trials of survival. The children's quiet vigilance reinforced the sense of shared resolve, small witnesses to the assertion of dignity and fairness. Each gesture, each glance carried weight beyond the words spoken by lawyers and authority. The legal confrontation unfolded with meticulous intensity. Jonathan presented the evidence of Isabel's experience, affidavits, witness accounts, and the children's testimony, each piece carefully considered and weighted with the truth. The documents were not merely paper, they were shields, instruments of justice that allowed him to stand as guardian and ally without raising a hand in violence. Isabel absorbed the process, her initial fear giving way to a burgeoning awareness of her own value, her right to choose, and the life she had begun to claim. The tension was thick, but the undercurrent of moral authority and support transformed fear into a quiet empowerment. Outside, the snow continued to fall, the storm now a distant echo of chaos, the cold a reminder of the harsh world beyond the cabin walls. Inside, a different kind of storm raged, and then settled, one of principle, courage, and the assertion of personal agency. Jonathan's unwavering stance and measured actions created a space where Isabel could begin to see herself not as an object of possession, but as a person of worth, capable of determining her own path. The children's presence, their quiet loyalty, reinforced the legitimacy of this new order, the cabin becoming a fortress of moral clarity and emerging trust. By the time the confrontation drew to a close, Isabel's chest lifted with a tentative confidence. Jonathan regarded her with recognition, seeing not only the woman who had survived the blizzard and the birth of new life in the barn, but a partner in spirit, an equal in courage and determination. Caleb's departure left behind the quiet hum of justice upheld. The cabin doors closed against the cold,
and a profound stillness that carried the weight of emotional victory. Isabel understood with a clarity born of ordeal that she was no longer defined by past suffering or external claims. Jonathan understood that their connection had deepened, forged in shared trial and the steadfast assertion of fairness. The storm within and without had left its mark, but from it emerged a sense of balance, resilience, and the possibility of love grounded in equality and shared struggle. Isabel's past, though present as a shadow, no longer dominated her. Jonathan's protection was not ownership, but witness and support. Together they had navigated the peril of external claim and internal fear, emerging on the other side with trust, respect, and the silent understanding that their connection, once forged through adversity, was now a foundation upon which a life together could be built.
The morning sun rose weakly over the Colorado Valley, casting long, pale shadows across the snow-dusted fields. The wind had softened, leaving a crisp clarity in the air, and the distant mountains shimmered with frost under the fragile light. Isabel moved through the homestead with quiet determination, her hands busy with tasks both small and significant. She checked the animals, ensuring warmth and nourishment, and her movements were precise yet gentle, the gestures of someone reclaiming a place and asserting her care. Jonathan watched from the doorway, leaning against the wooden frame, his eyes tracing her rhythm. He did not intrude, nor did he direct. He merely observed, appreciating the balance of strength and grace in her actions, the way she navigated responsibilities that had once felt insurmountable. The children followed Isabel with cautious enthusiasm, drawn into her energy and attentiveness. She guided them gently, showing them chores, feeding routines, and the delicate art of tending to the animals and the garden. Each lesson was subtle, each gesture intentional, and the children responded with trust and curiosity. Jonathan's presence was steady, providing security without interference, a quiet partnership in the rhythm of daily life. The cabin itself seemed to exhale in response to the harmony, the warmth from the hearth mingling with the sun's light to create a sense of enduring safety. Isabel's confidence grew with each passing day. She moved through the rooms, the barn, and the fields with purpose, reclaiming the home, not through assertion of power, but through consistent, caring attention. She tended the chickens, coaxed seedlings from the earth, repaired fences, and ensured the livestock thrived in the snowy terrain. Each act of stewardship was a declaration of belonging and resilience. Jonathan participated where he could, offering steady hands when needed, repairing tools, assisting with the heavier work, or sharing a quiet moment in the fields. Their cooperation was unspoken, communicated through the harmony of effort, the shared satisfaction of accomplishments, and the subtle acknowledgement of each other's competence. Love began to emerge in the small, almost imperceptible details of their interactions. Isabel noticed the way Jonathan anticipated needs without speaking, how he adjusted his pace to hers during outdoor work, and how he ensured she never felt alone in the vastness of the valley. Jonathan noticed her attentiveness, the way she responded to the land and the children, the way she balanced care with quiet strength. Their connection was woven into the cadence of daily life, a shared glance across a sunlit yard, the gentle passing of tools, the synchronized effort of bringing water to the barn animals, and the comfort of shared silence at the hearth in the evenings. The land itself became a symbol of their evolving bond. Isabel began plowing a sandy patch near the homestead, turning soil into furrows that held the promise of new growth. She planted vegetables and herbs, marking the earth with intention and hope. The chickens scratched and clucked in the yard, the garden beds began to take shape, and the soft glow of lamps inside the cabin reflected off frosted windows, creating warmth that mirrored the growing trust and affection between them. Each evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, the cabin glowed with a quiet life, the culmination of care, labor, and a shared vision for the future. Every day reinforced the reciprocity of their relationship. Jonathan's admiration and respect for Isabel deepened as he saw her resilience, patience, and ingenuity. Isabel's appreciation and affection for Jonathan grew as she recognized his steady support,
his careful attention to her autonomy, and the subtle ways he encouraged her strength. Together, they navigated the routines of life, the tending of children and animals, the maintenance of the homestead, and the careful stewardship of the land, creating a tapestry of shared responsibility and mutual recognition. Moments of rest were no less significant than moments of labor. Evenings were spent in the quiet comfort of the cabin where the children slept peacefully, and Isabel and Jonathan could sit near the fire. Sometimes they simply watched the flames. Sometimes they moved quietly through the house together, checking on a stray animal or adjusting the warmth of the hearth. Each touch, each shared glance, each moment of unspoken communication built an invisible bond stronger than words could convey. Their affection was steady, rooted in trust and the evidence of daily life, rather than in grand declarations. The valley outside, once a harsh and unforgiving expanse, seemed to respond to their presence. The sun warmed the snow in gentle glimmers, the wind carried the faint scent of pine and earth, and the distant peaks reflected a promise of continuity and endurance. Isabel's hands, once trembling with fear and uncertainty, now moved with confidence and care, shaping not just the land, but the rhythm of the household. Jonathan's watchful presence reinforced that care, validating her independence while providing unspoken partnership. As the days turned into weeks, their connection solidified into a steady, enduring pattern. Mutual support, shared labor, and attentive observation of one another's needs became the framework of their growing love. Each act, whether as mundane as feeding chickens or
Spring arrived gently over the Colorado Valley, softening the harsh contours of snow-covered earth. The thaw revealed streams running with clear water, the frozen soil releasing the scent of wet pine and fertile ground. Jonathan and Isabel moved through the homestead with a sense of shared purpose that had grown over the long months of winter. Their steps were synchronized in effortless cooperation, whether they were tending to the newly born animals, planting rows of vegetables in the rich soil, or teaching the children to care for both the land and its creatures. Every motion carried the rhythm of routine and the intimacy of trust, a quiet choreography of lives entwined. The old tree in the yard, weathered and strong, became a living monument to their unity. A simple wooden bench, newly carved, rested beneath its branches, bearing the names of all family members etched into its back. The children ran between the tree and the cabin, their laughter mingling with the soft rustle of budding leaves. Jonathan and Isabel shared quiet moments there, sitting side by side, letting the warmth of the sun and the renewed life of the valley fill the spaces that winter had left empty. Each glance and touch was laden with the understanding of shared history, struggle, and the deliberate building of a future together. The cabin and surrounding land blossomed under their attention. Isabel's careful hands guided the growth of the garden, turning patches of earth into thriving plots of vegetables and herbs. Jonathan repaired fences, cleared paths, and built small shelters for the animals. His work reflected the steadfastness that had first drawn Isabel's trust. Together, they navigated the chores of daily life, from milking cows to mending roofs, from collecting firewood to preparing meals, each task reinforcing the quiet intimacy of partnership. Their love, steady and deep, grew not through dramatic gestures, but through the constancy of care, the subtle affirmation of mutual respect, and the joy of watching their children thrive in the safe, nurturing environment they had created. The final act of their shared journey unfolded in the old barn where Isabel had first been discovered. The structure, once cold and silent, now carried the warmth of sunlight streaming through cracks in the timber, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air. Simple decorations adorned the space, wildflowers gathered from the valley, hand-woven cloths, and the quiet presence of friends and neighbors who had witnessed the family's resilience. The children flitted around the barn, their excitement tempered by the gravity of the moment. understanding in their own way that this day marked a culmination of survival, trust, and belonging. Jonathan and Isabel stood together, not in elaborate attire, but in clothing chosen for comfort and simplicity. The authenticity of their union reflected in their posture and shared glances. Their vows were unspoken, conveyed through the gentle entwining of hands, the steady gaze that acknowledged past trials, and the promise to continue facing the future as partners. Each gesture spoke of protection, devotion, and the quiet understanding that love is an act sustained through effort, presence, and the daily labor of care. The valley itself seemed to acknowledge this new beginning. The thawing snow revealed the vibrant green of early grasses, the streams hummed a soft melody, and the wind carried the faint, fragrant promise of blooming wildflowers. The children's laughter echoed across the hills, a living testament to the stability and warmth now embedded in their lives. The old tree with the carved bench stood as a sentinel of continuity, a symbol of choice, permanence, and the shared creation of a home. As the ceremony concluded, the family lingered in the barn and around the yard, savoring the quiet completion of a long journey. Jonathan and Isabel moved together seamlessly, tending to their children, ensuring the animals were cared for, and basking in the simple joy of being fully present in the moment. Every action reinforced the foundation they had built, a life formed not by circumstance alone, but by deliberate acts of love, attention, and fidelity. Their connection, tested by snow-laden winter and challenges, had matured into a resilient, enduring bond. The story concluded with the promise of continued life and growth. The valley, the cabin, the barn, and the small but thriving garden became emblems of hope and perseverance. Jonathan and Isabel's love was a quiet triumph, a testament to the idea that true affection is cultivated through shared labor, trust, and devotion. The children, the animals, and the land together reflected a harmony forged through adversity and nurtured by attention and care.
Tap that follow button and stay with us on this long, winding trail of Wild West love stories. Out here, every tale rises from dust and danger, built by steady hands and hearts that refuse to give up. If you're drawn to quiet promises, to love forged through storms and sunlight, to lives mended with courage and second chances, this is your place. Saddle up, stay close, and don't miss the next story waiting just beyond the horizon.